Good morning, everybody. With all the sessions taking place, thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm Danielle DeLauro, Executive Vice President of the VAB. So as I looked at the list of Advertising Week sessions, I noticed that there are a lot of CTV sessions, and I know that one just got out, and there's a lot of amazing conversations that are going on. And it's understandable, right, with all of the shift of viewing that's going on to CTV, with the increased focus on AVOD, it's the fastest growing channel. However, I think that there's one area of CTV that is the most interesting, and that is the one that we're going to talk about here today. And that is because if you think about U.S. retail media, connected TV ad spend, it's estimated to be $813 million this year in ad spend. But what's more interesting to me is the fact that by 2027, eMarketer says that that is actually going to grow 7 times. So that's what we're here to talk about, is why is there going to be this exponential growth? Why are advertisers going so quickly into this space? And really what is going to be the future of CTV and retail media. Now, I personally like to think of the two as peanut butter and chocolate, because of the fact that, you know, both of them separately are spectacular, but together, there's nothing better. So I could just also be saying that because I'm hungry, but with that said, I want to hear what our spectacular panelists have to say, so I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. You want to start, Ellen?
Yeah, sure thing. So Ellen Mouradian, I am a Senior Director of Retail Data Partnerships at the Trade Desk. And in my role, I work directly with retailers to bring their audience and measurement solutions into the Trade Desk platform. And then on the other hand, I work with advertisers and agencies to actually be able to leverage those solutions within their programmatic buys.
Ami?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ami Latia, Director of Product at Roundel, which is Target's retail media network. In my role, I lead all of our off-platform ad product strategy, which is inclusive of social, search, video, CTV, programmatic, and most recently, digital out-of-home and in-store. I've been in the space for almost a decade, and what truly excites me is building solutions for our clients and advertisers that helps them meet their goals. At heart, I'm a data, tech, product enthusiast, and I'm very excited today to just bring some interesting nuggets from the Roundel side of the house and also to hear from the esteemed panel that we have in here today. So thank you for having me and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Amy?
Amy Owen, I run the commerce discipline at University of McCann. I, like Ami, have had a almost 20-year stint in retail media. Yes, it was considered not sexy before it became sexy in the last few years. We have a focus within our practice to really understand all the different tactics that actually could trigger a sale, whether it be online or in store. And then also, as Ami just mentioned, the merge of tech, data, and retail media. So I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Okay, Dan?
Yeah, Dan Mouradian, VP of Global Client Solutions at Innovid. I focus on all of our advanced products, including dynamic, interactive, creative, and advanced measurement.
Great, thank you. So, Amy, for those of us who don't have 20 years experience in this space, I was wondering if you could just, you know, kind of take a step back before we start the discussion and really talk about what is retail media, how do you describe it to your clients, and how do you, encourage them or not to go in this space?
Oh boy. So from my perspective, retail media started in 1975. It was considered born with Act Media. Act Media was acquired by News America Marketing, which is now Neptune, in 1995, I believe. And so basically, it was rip the roof off the top of a store. Anything that you could buy inside it, we could buy on your behalf. That's how we started the practice, and so we wanted to make sure that we were at point of sale. Then this little thing came along called the digital boom, and there were retail media networks that were starting to come onto the scene. For those of you that probably remember, but Triad was something that started, and then also there were a lot of third-party partners that were really supporting retail media. And then COVID happened, and COVID actually changed the media consumption of who we were trying to reach and also behaviors of what we've seen in the marketplace. And I mean, so many retail media networks were born of that, and really have been stepping up their game. I mean, every single day I tell my team you can't be wrong because something changes, and that's where the data and tech come into play. So how are people shopping? People don't really want to have an extra step in their process. They want to make sure that their journey is for them. So we've evolved our practice over time to really understand what that behavior and consumer path might be. So that's where we started and where we are to date.
Thank you. And I think what's interesting is really stepping back and understanding how we've evolved and how things have changed. And Ami, I was wondering if you could tell the audience who or maybe aren't familiar with it how retail media utilize CTV and explain why clients are incorporating that into their campaign now.
I would love to take a step back and acknowledge what Amy mentioned in terms of how media consumption has been evolving. I mean, today, if you look at the guest behaviors, they are constantly trying to blend in the digital opportunities with how they really interact in the world. In fact, we have recent stats which states that 75% of our target guests either use Target app or are using Target.com as they're browsing in store. And so as these consumer behaviors are evolving when it comes to browsing or purchasing a product, it becomes extremely important that retail media networks also continue to evolve in their offerings to meet the needs in more of an omni-channel manner. And I would say CTV is the rising star in here, and one of the many offerings that we have in place to be able to reach our consumers where they are spending time. Coming to your question in terms of how and why are clients leveraging CTV today, I would say three main reasons. One, when a client uses CTV in their campaign, you are including an additional touch point that has high attention. And to back this up, Target actually did a recent survey this year for close to 3,000 shoppers, and 60% of our Target guests stated that they often or always use or are engaged when they're watching content on TV. And so that is a highly engaged audience that we are talking about that we want to leverage in this platform. Second, why do they use CTV? Because you get precise audience targeting and measurement insights. And last but not the least, not only can you leverage this audience for CTV, but you can also use that same audience across your entire digital media strategy. Thereby, you can help push your consumers further down into the conversion funnel. So all in all, I would say a win-win situation and why we are seeing more clients turn to CTV as part of their marketing mix and to truly deepen that connection with our guest in this journey.
And Dan, you've worked a lot with Ami together, and you guys have partnered on research in the space. And because this is a newer space, I'm wondering, when you were doing this research, are there things that surprised you? What did you learn that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so we published a joint study together called CTV in Commerce with Roundel. And what wasn't surprising was the amount of viewership that happens in CTV for us. We've been observing this trend over time as a video ad server. We deliver billions of impressions a day, and we can look at the distribution of those by device. But what was surprising to your question was how well advanced creative performed in that space. And so I have a couple stats here. When we talk about CPG and the use of CTV, so Innovid studied all of 110 plus billion impressions across our entire delivery footprint, and about 51% of CPG advertisers are advertising in CTV. So that's their total delivery across all digital. And then from a performance and creative perspective, when you leverage advanced creative formats, interactive creative performs much better than standard creative or just repurposing a broadcast spot in that connected space. And we see about a 93% video completion rate, which is 10% higher than standard video. And for formats that enable interactivity on average across that 110 plus billion, we're seeing 92 seconds of additional time earned. So this is an advertiser buying a 15 or a 30-second spot, engaging with creative that allows you to move through either product carousels or a discovery of different products within a CPG portfolio. And that time earned calculates from the time the user engages with their remote to the time they close that experience. And so when we look specifically at that interactive creative, we're seeing that incremental time earned, which can, on average here, we're seeing a huge increase in the time spent with that brand. Dynamic creative also performs very well in the space. We see, about a 10% higher completion rate for dynamic creative. And then as a part of that shopper survey, as Ami was mentioning, 79% of the respondents said that they are watching streaming TV over linear and cable, and about 21% purchase products from streaming ads. So the performance is there, and I think that's the really interesting thing when you view television. Most people just kind of think of television as this lean back experience, but because connected TV has all of the benefits of digital, you can do the precise targeting, you can have all of that personalized data being, fueling the impression, and then you are afforded those opportunities to engage with that creative in a way that we've been doing in digital for many, many years.
I think that's a really great summation, and thank you for sharing the stats. And I think that the idea of CTV and encompassing digital and the best of digital is such a good point and an important point. But the backbone of that is being able to really have the first-party data and be able to have that fuel everything. So Ellen, my question to you is, how does that first-party data and the enhanced targeting help? So we've talked about it from a creative perspective. How else does it really, catapult this to be spectacular for marketers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take a step back a little bit to talk about, and I'm sure many people in the room, I see some people I built flowcharts with back in the day for TV. When we were building our flowcharts back in the day for TV, we were thinking about, how many TRPs am I going to get against adults 18 to 49, right? And as you think about this shift into a more decisioned world that CTV kind of brings to bear, brands can then start to get much more precise with how they are actually leveraging those CTV budgets. We know it's a premium channel, and so we want every one of those impressions to work really hard for us. And so an example I'll give you is, let's say we have a diaper brand. If they're using the kind of legacy thinking of, I'm going to reach 18 to 49-year-olds, well, they're wasting a lot of impressions. Most of those people aren't having children. Only a few million babies are born in the US each year. And so the way that CTV and retail data really comes to fruition and can work for that brand is for them to start thinking about, okay, I only want to reach people who have purchased in this category in the last 6 months or 3 years, if we're thinking about how long kids are in diapers for. Or if some retailers are starting to bring really interesting predictive modeling techniques to this. So maybe it's not someone who's purchased yet, but we know the retailer knows they're about to purchase. They joined a registry, they're purchasing maternity clothes. And so again, you can shift those CTV impressions to make sure that they're really, really specific to who you want to reach, just making them more effective than kind of the old legacy ways that we've been thinking about buying. And the thing I'll add to that is, well, you may say, well, that's a really specific example, right? But even for larger CPG brands, if you think about maybe a brand who's number 2 in the category, they, again, need to make sure that each one of those CTV impressions is doing a lot of work for them. So maybe they make their targeting that they get from a retailer specific to their category, because they only want those CTV impressions to be working to help them grow in the category. And then maybe they let the leader work on making the category larger, for example. But that provides some really good examples of how advertisers can leverage that first-party data from a retailer within their CTV buys.
I think that what we've talked about so far, we've really showcased how retail media and CTV work together, and it all sounds great. But Amy, nothing is perfect. So I think my question to you is, what hurdles do you have to overcome? What have you had to overcome? What are the challenges that you face in this space?
Where do you want me to start? I think first and foremost, there is a lot of test and learns that need to happen in different categories to understand the space. And so from our standpoint, and I'm throwing out another slogan because that's kind of how my brain works, but commerce is a strategy. So we want to make everything shoppable everywhere all the time for that specific audience. So it's not necessarily going to be everywhere on every single media plan, but we should activate it when we can. We have had brands that have jumped in with 2 feet and said, we should test this, it makes complete sense. We've also had brands that said, oh, let them test it and then we'll see how it actually pans out. So I think first and foremost is understanding the behavior and seeing how it actually is impacting your brands. And it will vary by category. So that's kind of the first piece of it. The second piece is all about the data. So what data are you actually using? We have had many conversations on many panels all about methodology and measurement. I know Roundel is definitely with us when we need to create standardization and at least taxonomy to understand when they are measuring it, what does that mean? Because it's apples to oranges, and it's one of those challenges that the industry has held hand and said, let's figure it out. And then the third piece of it, I would say, is understanding the complexity of CTV and what it drives. And so what I mean by that is that it's a point in time and you're reaching someone on a personal level. So are you playing in the CTV space? Are you targeting them with the right data? But then are you delivering them the right message, and are you curating it for them? Because the consumer behavior and the media consumption, we're going back nowadays to, I want to see an ad just for me where I am, or else I don't want to be, surrounded by the noise. So I think those are the really big challenges that come to mind. There are others, but it really just depends on the category. It depends how the clients are honestly set up sometimes, where are the budgets coming from, how are we testing it, and so that's why I start out by saying it's a test and learn space, at least from my perspective in the commerce world, and we go from there.
When do you think it's going to get out of the test and learn space? If you had a crystal ball and you could say, this is when I think it's going to get out of that space, or is it so new that
I think it's the near future. I don't want to put that out there for people to just say she was wrong, quite candidly. So I just feel like it's the near future. So again, it depends on the category. So I mean, you mentioned diapers, like that's something that we know people are only in that mindset for a certain period of time, but instant consumables is different. So it really just depends on what traction that you're getting for the given category. So I would say that some might be, sold on it. There are others that will be sold on it. I think it's going to be part of the overall journeys that we're building. It would be shameful to ignore it. But it's just not 100% there yet, but it doesn't mean it's not going to be there.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen from other media is that the test and learn phase is sometimes the most important, right, to being able to get to wider scale.
Right.
I want to dive in on the second thing that you mentioned, which is measurement. Because what we've seen before is that in order to get to that scale, in order for more advertisers to get there, they have to understand that their investment is working, right? And the way that you get there is for measurement. So we talked a lot about metrics, right? So I think my question is, when you consider the success of these campaigns, what success metric do you use? Do you typically lean on one metric? Or does it vary by category, by advertiser? How are you thinking about that? Ellen, do you want to start?
I mean, I think we're seeing that every brand is leveraging something different. That's why when you mentioned standardization earlier, there's been so much talk about that in the marketplace, and certainly we all want to make our lives easier. I mean, my job would be a little bit easier if everyone was doing, all the retailers, for example, were doing things the same. But when I talk with each advertiser, they're also thinking about what standard looks like a little bit differently. And so I actually see that as a really exciting opportunity. And so, a lot of times people are thinking about incrementality or they're thinking about ROAS, but there's also the non-endemics in this space who are thinking about brand lift or some other metric. And that's what's so exciting about, especially the retail data space that's coming from these retailers, is that brands can use any metric that they want to, that they understand is important to them in their efforts. And so I've been really excited to see how brands have gotten creative with that.
Ami?
I would plus one to that.
Okay.
I don't think we have one metric that we can lay our finger on. It's going to be dependent on advertisers, brands, what they want to really accomplish from a goal standpoint, and how they continue to do targeting, selecting the right audiences, and what success really means to them.
Okay. Dan? Go ahead.
If you want me to. I'll just add to that. So we like to look at metrics in a three-dimensional way. So it's not just ROAS, it's not just engagement, but also understanding the relationship with the retailer. So we actually built the scorecard called Return on Retail Relationship. And it actually says if you're actually investing in CTV, are you getting incremental distribution? Does it strengthen your partnership with the retailer? Are you doing a lot of first, betas, and things like that? So again, just kind of adding on to the pile, but I just don't want to look at it in one way because there might be a reason that we are investing in this space that we might not be seeing it if we're looking at it from like one D standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, I would add to what everybody here has said, just by saying that measurement too often is looked at after a campaign, and if I could have my wish, it would be to have measurement influence not what happens next, but the next impression. Not the next campaign, but literally the next impression. So if you're thinking about advanced creative as an example, and you have a gallery and the user interacts with that and they view a product, the next ad they see should be that product or something along those lines. And you can do that in CTV, again, in ways that you couldn't do and you can't do in linear television. So whatever the metric is, and there are many, and whatever the measurement criteria is for a brand, as long as it's used in flight to optimize that next impression, and we're closer to that today than we have ever been because of something that I refer to as data mobility. Whether you're working with a brand lift partner, whether you're working with a retailer like Roundel who has that purchase data that can flow into the ad serving side of the house, you can optimize that next impression in that campaign in real time or in very near real time. And that's ultimately where I think measurement should go. It should be happening constantly, and it shouldn't be an insight after the fact, which is ultimately a diminished asset.
And when you think about the CTV space as well, if you think about a CPG brand, a few years ago, you didn't have the option to look at any of those metrics.
40 days later?
Right? Never. When I was agency side, I'd have clients saying, but I really want those metrics so I can be like a retailer and optimize in flight. And I'm like, oh, guys, what are you talking about? But now we're there today, and we have the ability for brands to leverage those metrics, in flight to make decisions, not waiting, 40 days after to make those decisions. And to be able to do that with CTV, again, a really premium channel that you need to work really hard for you, to be able to understand those metrics in flight so that you can influence how the remainder of the campaign goes is really exciting.
And I think that, Dan, what you talked about earlier, also back to success metrics, is creative, right? And how important and impactful creative is, especially in this space. Ami, with consumers becoming more receptive to taking action as a result of being inspired by the video creative, how is retail media evolving to meet that behavior?
Great question, and very excited about the work that is happening in this space. So at Roundel, we are continuing to enhance our creative experiences for our consumers, especially as they start becoming more receptive to some of the new video strategies like QR codes. I talked about the stat earlier where we have 75% of our guests who use Target.com or app as they are in stores. That percentage actually goes up to 90% when we think about the Gen Z target guest. These younger consumers are leveraging and embracing media consumption like never before. They are using their phones like never before when it comes to browsing or making a purchase. And so I think constantly thinking about building new offerings that can cater to this audience is at the core of what we think within Roundel. So as part of that, we actually launched our shoppable creative format pretty recently. To reduce the barriers to purchase using QR codes. So what really happens as part of this experience is you have a guest, they scan the QR code when they're watching the ad on TV, they can add that product to the cart immediately, and from then, they can actually complete the purchase using order pickup fulfillment type. Two great reasons why this works. One, you have the ability to actually now purchase items within categories like grocery that were not really shippable before. Second, great for consumers who want that product in store that same very day versus having to wait for shipping. So all in all, an offering that really works for our consumers and right in time for the holiday season. I would take a step further here and just point out some quick stats in partnership with the work that we did with Dan and team. We had a case study where we partnered with Mead Johnson on the Enfamil product. Using our shoppable creative, the brand was able to see greater than $10 incremental return on ad spend, which basically meant success because the guest resonated with the ad. It was relevant to them, and it was easy for them to make a purchase seeing that ad. Mead Johnson was also able to use a test and learn strategy, which is what we have been talking about quite a bit, on their audience strategy. So what they realized is that the past baby category purchasers audience worked better than past brand purchasers. This helped them with the opportunity to expand their audience targeting versus just leveraging the existing set of consumers. So all in all, I think we're seeing some great metrics come out of these case studies, and it just validates our confidence in the direction that we are taking from a CTV strategy standpoint.
Dan, do you have anything to add with that for the work that you did with Ami? I'm wondering specifically about the future of creative personalization or interactivity. I mean, you touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so when you think about personalization, I will generally say it's three things. It's data, content, and strategy. Data is what you know about the consumer, and Roundel has some of the best data available for a CPG advertiser. They know everything about the shopper, the category, the guest, how often they purchase, things like that. That data can go into a strategy and inform the next creative decision that happens. The creative that Ami was mentioning, again, it's a beautiful partnership that we have with them. We were actually able to use the QR code to integrate directly with the Target API, which allows the user to scan the QR code and add that product directly to their cart on their mobile phone. And again, removing all of those barriers. That introduces new metrics that you can then observe, things like scan rate. And again, if we're talking about that future of measurement where you're optimizing on actions that happen in flight, you can do lots of creative testing, whether it's the size of the QR code, the placement, how early the QR code shows up within the creative, where it is. All of those things become opportunities for a marketer to get better and better with each impression.
Right. So I see that we only have a minute and a half left. So if there's one innovation that you could have within this space in the next year, because we know it's a new space, what would it be? Very quickly, Ellen, if you want to start.
I'd love to see brands start to think about how to incorporate retail data into their upfront buys for CTV. How do they leverage that really rich data to make them more informed?
Right. Ami?
So much to look forward to, but if I were to pick one, I would say measurement. Retail media networks, along with organizations like IAB, have this fantastic opportunity to create net new metrics that we have never seen before in CTV to help us validate the success. So more conversations to happen going forward in this area.
I would say simplicity in a complex world.
All right, Dan?
I would say just more all the time. It's a really exciting space, and we should be doing everything that we can from an optimization perspective to make that next impression matter most.
That's a great end. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone here. I appreciate it. Thank you.